Jai Bhairava, Jai Matara, Jai Kamakhya. So, in continuation of the Ashta Bhairav series, today I'll speak about the next form of Ashta Bhairava, who's most unique and interesting, the form known as Unmatta Bhairava. So, the word Unmatta, as anybody who has any basic knowledge of Sanskrit would know, that Unmatta means madness. So, there are many wide range of words that depict madness in Sanskrit, but Unmatta very specifically indicates a kind of intoxication, a frenzy. There are a kind of the madness that comes when somebody is like possessed by something, whether it is an intoxicant drug or alcohol or some kind of an Aavesham of some other energy. So basically you are not in your ordinary senses, your ordinary thinking process does not work, and the person at the time is in the grasp of a different type of Shakti that may have come from maybe a substance, maybe some other kind of occult force, something like that. So that state is known as Unmatta Avastha, madness. So this form of Bhairava, as the name very typically indicates, uh, it's called Unmatta because this madness is not like the ordinary madness. So whenever there is a uh, uh, there is the condition of madness when we speak about, and it is not a very uncommon thing, by the way, in the history of religion, Hindu Dharma specifically, we have had many ascetics, saints, spiritual figures who were considered mad by others in some sense. Any deviation from normal is considered as madness by society, to be very honest. But this is an extreme form of being so engrossed in the Devata that it causes a very divine state. So, this Unmattata of Unmatta Bhairav, this condition, that word specifically here, indicates a kind of very intoxicating a divine madness that comes into a person where he is not bothered about the material aspects. The mind gets single pointedly uh, connected to or searching for, or rather in the grasp of something which is higher than himself or herself. And eventually, it produces a sense of bliss and a sense of great joy. So, this Unmattata is a kind of divine madness. And the form of Bhairava, who represents this divine madness, the lord of this divine madness, is Unmatta Bhairava. So, there are different types of stories associated with Unmatta Bhairava. One in some traditions of Sammohana Tantra, it is said that there was once a condition where uh, during the Devasura Sangrama, some of the Matrika Shaktis, some of the forces who are supposed to be on the side of the divine, were confused in their mind on which side they're fighting from, because you get into a frenzy. So it is, remember this frenzy means here, if they're constantly fighting, you are constantly trying for something, after a point you might even forget the goal. You get so engrossed in the act. It's like something takes possession of you and makes you do things, right? And you don't remember that what exactly was the goal, why you started whatever you are doing. So that kind of a frenzy affected some of the divine matrikas, and they were not sure which side they're fighting from during those battles. It is at that state that Shiva produced an ocean of intoxication from within himself. Like that intoxication, that state where a little bit of that energy, a little bit of breathing of that power by anybody uh, immediately causes them to lose sense of direction, sense of self. Okay, because you are not in complete control over your senses when you are intoxicated. And from that ocean of intoxication, Madhusagara is the term, awakened a being from within it who was like the very embodiment of intoxication. He is born because it's right from the top to bottom. That core ananda, that intoxication that is there, is within his being, full being. And this form was a form of Shiva, a form of Bhairava, and this is Unmatta Bhairava. And the first thing it does is that he reorients the mental direction of the Matrika Shaktis who were not sure in the course of the battle whether they're fighting from this side or that side. So this story, like all mythological stories that we have, are very strong clues or indications for upasakas that what exactly is the energy of this form that it contains. So Unmatta Bhairava, we'll come to that. We'll come to the analysis of the story in some time. But before that, we'll finish a bit of the iconography that is needed for Unmatta Bhairava. So he, unlike the other Swarupas of Bhairava, Unmatta is Shweta, his fair. Uh, there's a mild, intoxicating smile on his face. Uh, he holds four weapons. As always, there is a khappar and there will be uh, a shield-like weapon, and there is also a javelin-like weapon which he uses to throw in some of the iconographies. But most interestingly, he is also regarded as somebody who comes from the Ishana Swarupa of Sadashiva. He's connected to that in some senses. So there's a certain blissful intoxication inside Unmatta Bhairava. He's always in that mast condition. But more than mast condition, he can create and govern intoxications. And these intoxications need not always be due to physical substances. Sometimes there could be, in some cases, for example, people may have psychological conditions that lead to states of frenzy. There may be some kind of a disease, for example, because whatever is devoid of the normal, whatever deviates from the normal is like a disease. Madness is a disease, we call it. And he governs the ability to redirect that condition towards a more positive outcome. That is one of the first things that Unmatta Bhairava can do. So therefore, worship of Unmatta Bhairava is extremely good for psychological problems, weaknesses, habits that one is not able to get out of, uh, any and everything that makes one confused about one's life. So when somebody is at a state where there is an existential crisis, who's not sure whether to do right, to go left or right, when you are plagued by questions of who you exactly are, how do you define yourself, what is yourself, what is it that remains within you unchanged by circumstances, and these things happen during certain psychological crisis points. That is where Unmatta Bhairava, his blessings, can very easily help a confused individual to be guided into the right direction. He is also extremely good for removing depression and other kinds of such mental issues in people if correctly his upasana and seva is done. Unmatta Bhairava. Unmatta Bhairava governs the western direction. He has control over the graha we know as Shani. And these are some of the things, that psychological issues that I just mentioned are very often found to be a result of combination of Saturn with certain grahas, be it moon or be it Mercury or be it others, in certain conditions. I mean, those who do not know Jyotish should not randomly take one line and apply them and misapply them and misunderstand. But more or less, Saturn does have a role to play in certain kinds of psychological conditions. And that is also why Unmatta Bhairava Upasana, by controlling the ill effects of Saturn, also bring about a certain kind of discipline in mind. The one thing that Saturn rules, for example, to find out very easily if a person has an issue with Saturn, not just in the psychological level in terms of a very strong case of, say, depression or something like that, but more clearly one's ability to do work. A negative Saturn brings about certain degree of laziness, uh, the tendency to postpone things, and lastly, but most importantly, a tendency to not finish work. So you may take up a work with a lot of zeal, and then midway through you lose steam, you lose inspiration, you lose the ability to continue, and it doesn't get done, or you shift from somewhere one to the other, and then you give a lot of excuses, but also leads to a lot of guilt for not being able to execute something to the end. So that thought process that I will do xyz, whatever it may be, and then finishing it to the end, not being able to do that is also an indication sometimes of that Saturn is perhaps not beneficial for that upasaka. So all these things eventually can be sorted out by the blessings of Unmatta Bhairava. Of course, by blessings I do not mean it's not that so simple that just because if you have a if you just bow to Unmatta Bhairava or just chant one mala, it is immediately going to bring you results. No, it's more than that. Unmatta Bhairava upasana uh, eventually leads to Vamachara. It is almost all Bhairava upasanas require at least the offering of Karan if it has to be really potent. I mean, you can do Sattvic Upasana of Bhairava, but it is never going to bring, or never the energy is going to go to that extent where it is really possible for Bhairava's Shakti to manifest in its full glory. So that has to be very clear. Unmatta, more specifically, eventually, in very great depths, leads to invocation of more different aspects of Vamachara. Because in every, all of the tattvas, in fact, what exactly is Vamachara? If you have seen my other videos, you'd know that there is the basic idea of the Panchatattva that is offered to Bhagavati, to various forms of Devi in Tantra. So each of these, if correctly done, is bound to produce within the mind and body of the Upasaka a specific kind of energy that creates an intoxicating effect. Like um, like as if one is being possessed by a force or shakti that is outside of oneself, and in that state of possession, it's almost like if you see a horse moving and there are blinkers on both sides, so you can't see left and you can't see right, and your mind is absolutely focused on one thing, and you lose track of time, you lose track of place, you lose track of environment and everything, because your mind gets less distracted and becomes extremely focused on something, but also in a very mad and frenzied manner. That is definitely what Unmatta Bhairava can do, and not only does, but also governs it in a way that it is beneficial, which is the most important part. All madness is not divine. There are some madness which are just psychologically bad conditions, bad grahas, problem of pitrus, whatever it might be, whatever the spiritual cause might be, but not all madness is divine. The differentiation between what is divine and what is karmic reaction to some activities of past lives, that judgment is done by Unmatta Bhairava. And accordingly, he has the ability to reduce a negative type of Unmattata and increase this positive type of madness, this absolute submergence into a state of intoxication, divine intoxication by the. In the Damar Tantras, very interestingly, you'd see that Dhamma Tantras are very infamous or famous for all sorts of prayogas with respect to spirits and beings, yakshinis, gandharvas, kinnaras, bhoot, pret, etc. Everything is there in the Dhamma Tantras. And the whole of Dhamma Tantra starts as a conversation between Unmatta Bhairava and Unmatta Bhairavi. They are speaking to each other. Unmatta Bhairava is revealing the Tantras. So there used to be, in olden times, specific uh, cults of upasakas who would focus on any one of the Ashtabhairavas as their main deity. Because all of these are finally projections of Kala Bhairava. Kala Bhairava is one, Mahakal Bhairava. When he takes up a little bit of form, he becomes Kala Bhairava. From there, he emerges into the 8 Ashtabhairavas. But the essential Bhairava Tattva remains the same. Just that the activities differ, the personalities differ, the nature differs a bit, and the mantras, of course, differ a bit. One of the Vahanas of uh, Unmatta Bhairava that we find from the text is an Ashva, a horse. Why? That is because he's very fast in his action. Bhairava himself is fast, but Unmatta is even faster. So it comes from the weapon he holds, uh, from the Vahana who carries him. Whenever you see a deity with a Vahana like a horse, you know immediately that it represents what the rishis were trying to tell you is that speed is a immediate characteristic of that devata. So he responds with extreme pace. He moves very quickly because horse is a symbol of fast movement, very royal and very fast movement. Unmatta Bhairava Upasana also helps one not only to remove various kinds of psychological problems, various kinds of addictions that one may have, confusions it can remove. It protects one from, as other Bhairava forms also do, from any kind of black magic that is there. Unmatta Bhairava is very good after a point if uh, there are abhichar related kriyas that have been done on somebody, so he can break down that kriyas because of that state of intoxication, that frenzy that comes in the soul of the Upasaka of Unmatta Bhairava is so powerful that it can break down any negative that is there. Anything, any kind of astra that is sent towards the Upasaka, Unmatta Bhairava Shakti can break down those completely. Okay. But of course, it's not on day one. It's only when the higher stages, when there is a possession of the soul of Unmatta, or possession of the soul of that Upasaka by Unmatta's Shakti, then it happens. Eventually, all Bhairava sadhana. See, Bhairava is first and foremost a Devata. He's Shiva only who comes down to this plane. Because he's here in this plane, he comes quickly. Somebody takes one step towards Bhairava, Bhairava takes two steps towards you. But Bhairava is a god of truth, of reality as it is. Bhairava is those of one of those Devatas who has the least amount of Maya around him. All other Devatas carry their Maya, project their Maya, and those who are bound by a certain degree of Maya. Maya here means a kind of, uh, for lack of better words, for example, you have a, say you are doing a particular puja, there's a set of rituals you do, set of offerings you give, you have a particular life, you have a job, you have your friends, your family, etc. And you are reasonably happy doing this set of things day in and day out and enjoying the small benefits and joys that come out of it. That's a set life. That's a very nice, good, happy life. But there is also an attachment to that state of not moving too fast, not moving too slow, not changing things, more or less a basic happiness. There are material comforts around you, things like that. So that itself creates an attachment towards that state. That is Maya. Maya comes not only in material things, but also very likely even in spiritual things. Very easily it comes because you get attached to some things, you get attached to a format. So there's a rule, a set of format. First thing about the Bhairava Tattva is that in general, Bhairava eventually takes one outside of formats. That is his core nature. And that is not just for Bhairava, by the way. That core nature is present even in the older stories of Shiva. When Shiva comes in the Daksha Yagya, when he's cutting off the head of Daksha, we find that story, right? That's the first powerful instance where we find that when he's insulted, eventually Daksha means one who's an expert in rituals, expert in things. So that element of transcending the set order, the prescribed rules that have been given by society, the rules that have been given by ordinary dharma, because dharma is circular. Dharma, first there's an ordinary layer of dharma. Once your consciousness changes, the dharmic rules that you have to follow, the rules of the universe following which creates the maximum amount of sustenance around you also changes the moment the consciousness changes in an individual. This is a lived reality. As the consciousness is at the lowest order, so therefore in that state there are many other rules that have to be followed. Once it transcends to a certain state, then the rules change, which is why we say that somebody who becomes an avadhuta condition, which means that the consciousness is liberated from everything, such an individual need not follow the ordinary rules of dharma at all. In fact, no avadut actually follows the rules of dharma. If you find an avadut who is too stickler about rules, then perhaps he has not reached the state of avadut. So this transcendence is very natural. That Advaitam comes in. You see a oneness in things, various kinds of rules of purity, impurity, all these things break down. So this breaking down, this transcending of the normal condition uh, is Bhairava's domain. And in this, Unmatta causes this transcendence by grasping the soul of the Upasaka very strongly into a state of frenzy. He the Upasaka becomes so engrossed in that condition that he or she will not be able to follow all the rules that are set for ordinary worship or set by society, and will transgress those rules. All of the Bhairavas cause transgressions, but Unmatta does it by a state of frenzy and madness, divine madness, not an ordinary madness. So there is no karmic repercussion to that breaking of rules. He is able to sustain the uh, state, he is able to uh, overturn the normal conditions, go beyond them. Okay. And it opens up different portals in his mind, different portals in his body of various kinds of, for lack of better words, what we call siddhis, etc. So offering Karan to Unmatta Bhairava is an extremely good practice. It is a symbolic gesture of, first of all, even at a practical level, Bhairava likes intoxicating things. That is well known, well established, both by tradition as well as by practice. In the case of Unmatta specifically, what is known as Khappar Seva to Bhairava, which means that you have a Khappara and where you offer Karan to Bhairava, becomes extremely important because it causes an intoxication in Unmatta Bhairava. Just that feeling, that sense, that offering immediately. And when he is happy and when it is done with the right kind of genuine kind of bhakti and devotion without trying to be smart. So Bhairava Upasana has this very interesting thing. He is not a normal deity like others. He is a god of truth. If there is any kind of pretension inside or trying to be over smart, he will cause a reaction to that Upasaka in order to teach him and bring him closer to reality. That is his role. If Bhairava can teach Brahma, he can teach anybody. Brahma is the creator of the Vedas and everything for that matter. So that offering of the Karan to Unmatta Bhairava, when it is rightly done, in the right manner, in the right bhava, it brings a lot of blessings to the Upasaka. He takes it and in return, he gives bliss, which translates to material benefits, psychological benefits, mental happiness, various things. So eventually, we see that Unmatta Bhairava is one of those extremely exquisite and beautiful forms of Bhairava. One of the forms that Kala Bhairava takes in order to transcend the ordinary reality into the divine reality, using a state of madness. This Unmattata, by the way, this frenzy that I'm speaking of, is also similar to what you see in various kinds of Aavesham rituals that are there across India. And not just Bhairava, by the way. This Aavesham happens even in the worship of Skanda as well. That gripping of the soul, that gripping of the mind and body as if something is in possession. But, and here is the most important thing, if the Adhara is weak, a little bit of possessive energy, the little bit of Shakti of Avesham comes in, and the Upasaka will not be able to handle it properly. So therefore, at that time, it is very important to have somebody to mentor, somebody to tell you what to do, or even before that, if you don't have a mentor, it is important to do the japa, the sadhanas, whether it is the Vishesh sadhanas or the Bhairava Nama japa, etc. One has to religiously carry on for years, because every time you take that mantra, it changes your adhara, makes it a little bit stronger to be able to handle these powers. Otherwise, neither the mind nor the body is equipped to handle them. And a little bit of that Shakti comes in and one gets disturbed, disoriented, in fact. And then Unmatta Bhairava withdraws his power because he sees that this Upasaka is not yet of that state where he can handle that Shakti. But yes, for somebody who can, it's the most blissful feeling. It's absolutely beautiful. Among the Matrika Shaktis, we know Unmatta Bhairava is connected to Varahi. Varahi is one of the Matrika forms. I mean, Varahi herself can be a full discourse, but I won't go into that at the moment. Uh, Varahi is very, very good in removing abhichara related kriyas. Varahi worship at the highest level requires offerings of the Panchatattva. Varahi worship works very well when done at night. The deeper the night, the better the results. And our homas are extremely potent in destroying black magic. And this connection with Unmatta Bhairava By the way, Unmatta Bhairava also has another Bhairavi known as the Unmatta Bhairavi, which we find in some of the texts. So there is some difference somewhere. For example, in some perspective, Unmatta is the guardian of the Varahi Shakti. Like every Shakti will have a consort who is also a guardian. Whereas Unmatta's own core Shakti is known as Unmatta Bhairavi. But in other traditions, his Varahi is considered as the consort of Unmatta. But Varahi worship is more complicated. Varahi worship requires certain kinds of training for an Upasaka. Again, worship is easy, but one has to know what to do and should have the ability to do it properly. Step by step, one can't just jump into that. So, with that, I'll end the video here. Among the Ashta Bhairavas, Unmatta Bhairava temples, the Ashtabhairava temples are there in Kashi. Whoever is interested can visit, though they're very small right now, which is precisely why when the Bhairava temples are constructed that I have in mind, for which my team is working at the moment in different parts of India, we will have at least a representation of all the Ashtabhairavas along with the Moola Bhairava Sarupa. It has to be there because Ashtabhairava worship brings very quick positive results, specifically for people in the path of Bhairava sadhana. It's beautiful. It grounds you in different aspects of reality. Bhairava is the god of reality, the god of truth, the god of Satyam. And he shows that truth has many dimensions and facets. And each of these dimensions are governed by one aspect of Bhairava, and these become the Ashta Bhairavas. Jai Ma Kamakhya, Jai Matara, Jai Bhairava.